I work at several attractions for the Big Mouse that has tourist destinations in Orlando and Anaheim. When I first started working for the Mouse, I learned that most of the buildings were haunted in one form or another. Generally, I take this stuff with a grain of salt. Show me the science or prove it to me, then I'll believe. I've had 2 separate encounters with 2 ghosts in 2 different attractions, and let me tell you, I believe a hell of a lot more now. Experience 1. In a slow-moving journey through time, you come across a scene where a famous painter is lying on his back, painting the ceiling of a building. There is a ladder going up to that scene, and the rumor was that a maintenance guy had a heart attack during his shift one night and dropped at the base of the ladder. No one found him until the next morning, and he was already dead. It became a tradition upon closing the ride for the night to tell him good night, or else havoc would come down upon the ride the next day. Silly, I know, but we all played along. I never really believed in it. Everything seemed very circumstantial. On one particularly slow day, I was riding through the attraction when all of a sudden it stopped in that scene I mentioned earlier. Now, if you've ridden this ride, you'll know that it's basically a train car with 2 rows. Well, as far as I could see ahead of me, there was no one. As far as I could see behind me, there was no one. The ride system is pretty sophisticated. When someone hops out, there are pressure-sensitive mats on one side that trigger the ride to stop and show on our ride display screen exactly where it is. On the other side of the ride vehicle, there are photoelectric beams that also give the exact location of this intrusion, as we call them. Now, we stop this ride pretty often. Someone takes too long to get into the ride vehicle, stop it, and then start it back up again. Well, in this case, they started speaking over the intercom into the entire ride. That usually means someone is out of a vehicle somewhere on the ride. A few minutes into sitting there, I start to hear keys jingling, 2 sets headed in my direction. I'm completely alone, and here come my fellow Mouse employees, looking rather concerned. "Josh, did you jump out?" Of course I hadn't, to which I told them. They look at each other and back at me, both looking from the opposite directions they've come from. "Did you see anyone?" I hadn't. It was just me. The mat and the I-beam were both triggered in this scene. We all sort of stare at each other and sort of whisper the ghost's name at each other. They leave, and within 5 minutes we are moving again, but I never rode alone again. This is experience 2. Another attraction I work at is a motion simulator that spins and creates G-forces to simulate spaceflight. When the attraction first opened, there was only one option. The story goes that a mother brought her child in to experience the attraction, and when the attraction had finished, the child was unresponsive. Emergency services were called, and it was later discovered during the child's autopsy that he had an undiagnosed heart condition. This much is true. There is a fellow Mouse employee who was working on that day and remembers the story. Multiple other Mouse employees have looked up the story, myself included. Since then, it's been said that the ghost of that little boy likes to hang around in the ride room where he died. There are multiple reports of hearing him laughing during opening procedures, of him calling out for his mom, of the sensors going off before the ride starts, and upon checking the cameras, there being stuff in front of it that definitely wasn't there before, since we check all of the cameras before the ride starts. Again, I'm usually very skeptical about this sort of thing. One morning, I'm scheduled for an opening shift, which doesn't normally happen due to my low seniority. I show up and go to open ride room number 3, which is the room where this little boy met his tragic end. During opening checks, there is one person in each of the 4 rooms, all completing the same tasks. Ride rooms 1 and 2 are connected by a small closet, and ride rooms 3 and 4 are similarly connected by a small closet. We usually don't chat in the mornings with the person opening the other ride room since we are all trying to get through our checklist as quickly as possible. I get to the part where I'm about to run the ride and check for errors at the end of my checklist and go in to start closing up my vehicles. It gets pretty loud in there, to the point where if we need to get someone's attention, we have to raise our voices. I start to check my ride vehicles and close the first 2 of 10. That's when I start gearing laughing. A little boy. At this point, I'm pretty sure it's one of the other openers playing a joke on me, so I move on. Go to check the next 2, they're good, so I close them. I hear the laughter again, closer and louder this time. I turn around to check over my shoulder, and there's a faint flicker of movement from the corner of my eye. So I go to check and see what it is. There's nothing. At this point, I'm spooked. I hurry and check the rest of my ride vehicles, close them up, and do a final check of my ride room before closing everything up and setting the ride to start. I hear the giggling again, turn around like last time, and there's a faint shimmer disappearing down the hallway. Of course, I chased it to see what was there. Turns out to be nothing again, so I went to the other ride room to see who was opening over there. A girl that I've worked with before quite a bit. She opens up and tells me she's had similar experiences where it looks like someone is watching you, or just out of the corner of your eye and there's no one there, and that the laughing sometimes gets to be just downright creepy. Multiple people have encountered this little boy's ghost at various times during the day, mostly under the conclusion that he's lonely. I attended a school back in 2014 that was so haunted I still don't believe it. Me, many other students, and also some of the teachers who were working there saw things go flying in the air, heard footsteps, were sometimes touched by something we couldn't see, and had various new and expensive equipment fail whenever the ghost entered the room we were in, and so on. I myself had an iPhone 5 and a fully spec'd late 2012 iMac at the time. The various tech problems all disappeared as soon as I left the school and took my stuff back home with me, BTW. The iMac is still in use today by my uncle, and he has experienced no issues with it to this date. So to my first serious experience at the school. One night I was alone with a girl at my student house because everyone else was partying down at the school building, when suddenly we started hearing footsteps from the attic upstairs. It was a tiny room up there. That was only big enough for storing some tour and hiking equipment, like a few backpacks and such. After maybe half a minute or so, the footsteps started coming down the stairs from the attic. At this point, me and my friend went dead silent, and we were both just staring towards the door that went to the attic. The footsteps came all the way down and went into the living room where we were sitting. At this point, the sound of the footsteps switched from sounding like someone walking around in big boots into what to me sounded more like someone coming wet and barefoot out of the shower or tub. When the sound got to the middle of the room, which was right in front of where me and this girl were sitting, it stopped, and for a few brief moments, there was nothing but dead silence. The girl and I just looked at each other for like 5-10 seconds before my eyes caught something going on behind the girl's back. We were sitting on a couch together, and behind her were these huge windows that went from the floor and all the way up to the ceiling. They had some seriously huge blinds as well, and so I watched this pretty heavy lead thing that certain industrial blinds have be lifted all the way up from the floor to just above the middle of the window. There it kept floating in the air for about 5 seconds before it was punched into the window with such force that I'm sure the window would have broken if it hadn't been for those thick blinds protecting it. The girl didn't see this as it happened behind her back, but you can be sure that she heard the noise. In fact, she got so scared that she literally jumped into my lap screaming. That's the moment when I stopped trying to give possible natural explanations to everything paranormal. I went with my best friend during high school for summer vacation to his grandparents, who live in the countryside in Japan. I stayed in his mom's old room, which has a small wall closet. Just above this closet was a smaller closet door just above it, which was like 1.5 feet tall and about 3 feet wide. It was a weird design nonetheless, but that's just because their house is old. The first couple weeks, I was pretty jet-lagged, and Japan is hot and humid, so I didn't really sleep at night. If my light was off at night, though, I always felt uneasy about that small closet space. Something about it just felt darker than the rest of the room. Toward the end of the second week, I started to adjust to the time difference. One morning I woke up and that small door was open. It was unsettling, but I closed it and just thought maybe it wasn't closed all the way and came loose. A couple nights later, I woke up feeling uneasy. It was dark and I could kind of see that small door was open. It was much darker than the rest of the room, like black, pitch dark. This was the first and only time I experienced paralysis. I was too scared to move, say, or do anything. I just felt this darkness coming from there. I don't remember sleeping that night, but I must have, because I remember waking up the next morning. I told my friend about my whole experience of the night, and immediately after, he said his mom told him about something like that too. When we got back home, and I talked to his parents, his mom kind of joked with me, "So, I heard you met the ghost." When my wife was young, her parents and siblings lived with one set of her grandparents. Her grandfather was murdered in the home. It happened in his bedroom upstairs. The room was used primarily as storage for the next 20-plus years. Her parents tried to sell the house multiple times, but living in a small town, everyone knew, and the house would not sell, so they stayed. Years later, and while my wife and I were engaged, there was a murder trial which I attended in support of her family. I saw the crime scene photos. Important later. Another few years later, we had 2 kids. The oldest was 6 at the time. My wife's family does not talk about the murder, and our kids do not know about the murder to this day. My father-in-law decided he wanted the room where the murder happened to be a hangout for the grandkids when the family was in town. He put sleeping bags and a TV in the room ahead of a holiday, days-long get-together. We didn't like it, but stayed silent since the murder was a sore subject. My father-in-law also wanted all the grandkids to all sleep in there together. We were the first to arrive, and my son went into the room alone. He usually couldn't sit still long at that age, so after a couple of hours I decided to check in on him. Here is our conversation. During the whole conversation, he was still and rigid, and would not look away from the TV. "Hey buddy, is everything okay up here?" "Yeah." "Okay, have fun." "Daddy, do I have to sleep in here?" "I don't want to." "Why not?" "I am not alone." Every hair on my body stood up. "Well, yeah, I'm here with you, buddy." "No, there is someone in here with us." "Are they nice? Mean? A grown-up? A kid? A grown-up. What are they doing right now?" "They are watching you," I said with a lump in my throat. "You have never said anything like this at your grandparents' house before, and you have been here a lot," he replies. "They don't leave this room, and I have never been in here before." My heart skipped a beat, and I said, "Where are they now?" Without looking away from the TV, he points to the far corner where his great-grandfather was murdered and said, "They are standing over there. They don't move much." I had had enough of it, so I hastily said, "Okay, buddy, you don't have to stay in here," and he left the room with me.